What's up, everybody, and welcome to Fantasy Football Today, DFS. I am your host, Nejad, and of course, I'm here as always with Wait a minute. You don't look like Mike McClure. This is Degenerate75. Listen, before I intro James, who you all know, he's a friend of the show. Mike McClure, you saw his tweet a few days ago. He actually had a fire in his building. He's not back in his unit yet. And so we had to have somebody sub in. Have no fear. His top three will be at the end of the show. His cheat sheet will be here at the end of the show. But James, you've been on this show before, actually recently. I'm really excited to talk about the Week 3 main slate with you.
Look, it's pretty simple. You're like Gotham City, and like when you put up the bat signal, I just drop everything. You got responsibilities. You got to take care of them. I saw the bat signal last night. I was like, I'll be there, bro. I'll be there.
That's right. That's James, and I really appreciate you for that because it was really short notice that James jumped on with us. I know you've already done sort of a slate preview. I know you've done that with Tambo, and I do. Speaking of that, I want to remind everybody we got the Fantasy Football Today DFS contest out pretty late this week. So we've only got it like a quarter full. So make sure it's going to be in the YouTube description. Of course, it's going to be all over Twitter and in the podcast description. So it's only $5. Make sure you join that. But DGen, I think you have a fantasy football every single week contest, right? How do people access that?
Yeah, just a little listener league, a $5 3 max, reduced rate, flat payout structure, just community builder type thing. And you can find it. I tweet it out. I'll be tweeting it out tonight at 7:00 on the Twitters. X. That's I don't know if I'll ever be able to adjust to that. Okay.
Yeah,
also, it's in the description of all my YouTube videos and my newsletter, the Motherfather newsletter over on Substack. We put it out this morning, so there are a lot of ways to get access to it.
By the way, if you're happy about DGen being on the show today, go ahead and hit the like button on YouTube. Maybe retweet the show. I got to retweet it myself over here on the X. Can't stand saying that. I'm not going to lie to you. All right, James, let's dive in. This is a pretty fast-paced show. We're just going to go through each game of the main slate, and we're going to talk about some of the plays we like, some of the correlations we like. I know, James, you're not a picks guy necessarily, so we can just kind of dance around that to some degree. Obviously, we're going to be saying some names. I'm certainly going to be, but correlations, games you like that's what I'm really kind of trying to invest in terms of having you on the show. This first game that I want to talk about is actually one of my favorites. And I wonder, listen, it's a high total, so a lot of people are going to be interested in this one. But it's the Falcons +3 at the Lions, 46.5 point total. One thing I like about these Lions games is the Goff splits at home. He's got that manicured environment in the dome. But I think more importantly, because so many people are going to be focused on that Justin Herbert, Kirk Cousins game, Chargers, Vikings, I think this one is going maybe a touch under the radar. And I'm not looking at ownership right now, so I don't know that for a fact. But I'm interested in this game. I think a Goff, a Mon-Fri stack, or even a double stack that might include Josh Reynolds or Laporta, and just bringing it back with Bijan, who got a ton of work last week relative to week 1, where he was just, I think it was 10 carries. Last week he was pretty dominant, but he's expensive. Do you think in your main lineups, James, you're going to have a stack or even have Bijan in your lineups from this game?
So I may not have picks, but I have takes. And my take is this: Bijan is even more electric than I thought he was going to be. Yeah. So I want to attack this game. I really do. Anytime the game is at Detroit, you just try to get some access to it. But I've already stated that I think the problem with this game is I think the Falcons are not real great, Bob. And with that, I don't know that they can push the Lions. And for the Lions to have an elite upside type game that you're going to need to win GPPs and stuff, they're going to need the Falcons to push them. But if I could give one caveat, when you have electric players like a Bijan Robinson, if he busts that 80-yard touchdown run or catches a screen and takes it to the house or something like that, that pushes the flow of the game and it makes the Lions super, super appealing. So as much as I don't like the Falcons, I do like some of their individual pieces, Pitts, London, Bijan, because at least those guys are elite talents who could push the pace of this game and make this game like the secret shootout game of the slate that nobody is really thinking of.
Yeah, I certainly agree with the shootout part. I mean, listen, this is not a 44-point total. It's 46.5, and it wouldn't shock me if this one touches 50. And we know the Falcons like to run the ball. The pace is probably going to be slow, but I think you can run on Detroit. I mean, we haven't really seen them play like great running teams yet, at least not collectively over the 2 games. They've got some injuries on the defensive side. Gardner Johnson's hurt. James Houston is hurt. I think we could see Bijan rip off a couple of huge runs, which would actually press Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown and that whole unit to pass the ball a little bit. So I think my second favorite stack, if not my first, is going to be a Jared Goff stack and just bringing it back with Bijan, because I think the running game alone could actually push the Detroit Lions if it works out like I wanted to. Are you in on the Josh Reynolds experience? Because I had him last week, had him the week before. Feels pretty good to me. He's only 4,200.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem with Josh Reynolds is he just doesn't get those guaranteed targets that I usually like for my guys in cash. You know, he was very touchdown dependent last week. I watched a lot of that game, and yes, he caught 2 touchdowns, and he ends up, you look at the score, he had a very nice game. But for my cash games, I would rather see a guy who's getting, like, on average 8 to 10 targets a week, because that offers me that really safe floor. Love Josh Reynolds for, like, GPP type plays, and if Amon-Ra's out, then yeah, you can probably play him in cash. But to me, the bigger news would be like what's going on with David Montgomery. I think him being out opens up a lot, and not only a lot of value for the Lions, but also maybe how they play the game. I don't think they'll be running between the tackles as much if David Montgomery is out.
So you're feeling not a lot of Craig Reynolds, but a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, he's 6,300. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to pay up for him. I could be wrong. What are you thinking on Jahmyr Gibbs?
I love him. I mean, I think that he's kind of that same home run hitter as Bijan is. And the best thing that I could say about Gibbs is I think he actually pairs pretty nicely with a Goff stack, right? Most people think when I stack my quarterback, I can never put the running back with him, but Gibbs is going to probably get 7 targets out of the backfield. And if just one of those is a touchdown, those two are going to be absolutely correlated in a smash lineup. And all that usage of Montgomery being out has to be soaked up by somebody. And who is more in line to get that than Jahmyr Gibbs?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs got 9 targets last week. He caught 7 of them. That alone, like, just think of him as a receiver who's going to get like Debo rushing usage, because he had 7 carries last week, but he had 9 targets. I mean, that's what you're looking for, especially if you think this Atlanta defense can't contain him. So enough about that game. It sounds like we both love that game, whether it's a skinny stack or whether it's just taking pieces from it. Now, this Titans game at the Browns, Titans are plus 3.5. I think as it stands right now, this might have opened at 4. I like the Titans a lot in this game. I don't know why this line is over the key number of 3. But the only player that I think anybody wants to play here, speaking of cash, I mean, I think this guy is very cash game viable, even though it's not a great matchup against the Titans. I mean, Jerome Ford's kind of an obvious play, right? Is there anybody else you'd even consider playing? And are you out on Jerome Ford in tournaments?
Yeah, so Jerome, I mean, I'm a little, they signed Kareem Hunt, obviously, so I'm a little anxious to see how that's going to play in. He is a guy that can probably just come in and instantly start playing, as he is going to be very familiar with their system. And with that, it just makes me wonder, like, what's his upside? Like, is he only going to get 12 touches, 15 touches? And yes, it's not the best matchup. I would say in cash, you always, a starting running back who's guaranteed probably around 15 touches, you usually want to play at $4,800. But I think in tournaments, there's a real path to fading Jerome Ford, just like there was to Josh Kelly last week. Everybody got FOMO about Josh Kelly, and he was like 30% owned, and what did he get, like 3 points? So there's always a path to fading marginal running backs in tough matchups whenever they're going to be mega chalk. So my short answer would be yes, I could fade him in tournaments.
And you'd agree with me, because I know a lot of the listeners, Fantasy Football Today DFS listeners, they want some sort of separation. They want me to kind of point out some cash game viable players. You'd agree with me that Jerome Ford is pretty good from a cash game standpoint.
Yeah, yes, he's probably the best cash game running back, because a cash game, you want a guy that offers you, at least a 2x floor. So in his case, at least 10-point floor, but you still want him to have that 20 to 25 point upside, that 4 or 5x upside. And I think Jerome Ford offers both of those things. At 15 touches, with a couple of those being targets, he's very likely to get to that 10-point floor. But also, if he falls in the box or maybe gets a 100-yard rushing game, he also has that 20, 25 point upside, which is kind of the nuts when it comes to cash game.
Yeah, and Swaggy P, just referring back to that Detroit game, Craig Reynolds getting touches and goal line work on Sunday. Swaggy P, I agree. I mean, but I do think if he's going to really pay off in your tournament lineups, he does have to land in the end zone most likely. Because he's probably not going to get that passing work. But that statement doesn't mean I don't think he's a good play. I do think he's a good value, especially if you're stacking high-end receivers and you're just punting on running backs, which you can. I mean, you could go Jerome Ford, you could go Craig Reynolds, and you go Joshua Kelly. You're not paying more than $5,500 for a running back. So that's an option if you want to build like that.
And don't forget, Deshaun Watson's not good, and that's going to negatively impact him.
Who's not good?
Deshaun Watson.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, is there anybody else from this game that you even like?
I mean, anytime it's a slow, sloggy game, I'm always interested in Derrick Henry, because I bet he's going to get 20 to 22 touches, and he hasn't busted that 80-yard touchdown run where he stiff arms everybody into the earth. One of those is coming, right? So the problem is, and when he just gets one of those, he breaks the slate, because not only is he getting that touchdown and all those yards, he'll get the 100-yard bonus. He'll be in a script that will have him running the ball more. So anytime I think the Titans could be playing from ahead, I'm always warm to Derrick Henry, because that guy just never seems to be more than 10% owned anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's not that sexy name, or he's not as sexy as some of these guys who catch 5, 6, 7 balls. But by the way, keep an eye on Derrick Henry in terms of his practice reports. Let's make sure he's playing Sunday. I'm sure he is. Amon-Ra St. Brown does look like he's trending towards playing. It looks like he has a mild turf toe injury. But these are all things you have to monitor. And if these guys are out, it's not only important because they're out and you can't play them. It's important because, well, who's there to take their spot? What kind of value opens up, especially when you're considering cash and tournament options. Let's go to the Broncos, -6.5. I'm surprised this isn't 7 or more, to be honest with you. They're -6.5 at the Dolphins. It's a 48.5-point total. It's looking like Waddle is trending to not playing. With that in mind, I mean, Braxton Berrios at 3,600, Craycraft at 3,400. They're at least interesting to open up value. But obviously, Mostert is going to be a popular play here. Javonte Williams maybe at 5,500, Tyreek Hill at 9K. Which of these guys that I mentioned are you interested in? Or are you just out on this game?
So often when a star is out, like Waddle being out, they always just think, oh, well, the backup is the guy who will soak up all that usage, right? You know, like last night on the 49ers game, everybody assumed because Ayuk was out, Jennings was the smash play. But what people fail to realize is a lot of time whenever a player is out, that opens up usage to everybody on the offensive set. So it actually makes me like a guy like Durham Smythe, the tight end, right? A nice punt tight end now because somebody is going to get those targets, and most people are just going to go to Berrios and Craycraft naturally. And so I think a guy like Durham Smythe and Raheem Mostert are the guys that might be able to soak up some of that usage that no one's thinking about. But those targets have to get absorbed somewhere. Why can't they be at a different position than the wide receiver? So those would be some guys I'd be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I love that because if you go that route, now you've found your punt tight end, right? Because a lot of people are looking for that slate to slate. I mean, they don't necessarily want to pay up for the Kelceys or the Mark Andrews of the world, and they're in that sort of 3K range. Well, Durham Smythe's 2,900. So now you've sort of solved your punt tight end problem while opening up a ton of cash for all your other positions. Yeah, and I'll just note that I do like Tyreek Hill. I don't think he's going to make it into my lineups because it's very likely I'm going to be playing Justin Jefferson and some other high-end receivers like a Keenan Allen, for example, in that Vikings spoiler alert. You know, one of my favorite stacks is Cousins to Jefferson with a Keenan Allen bring back. If I do that,
so brave of you. So brave.
I know. If I do that, putting Tyreek Hill in my lineup is going to be questionable there, just from an affordability standpoint. So, any interest in Javonte Williams, 5,500 going up against the Dolphins?
No, I think the Broncos are fool's gold. I just don't like them. I know they had the big total last week, but if you watch the game, like that's just not who they are, right? They got the two bombs to my dude Marvin Mims, the Hail Mary at the end to Johnson. I mean, they're just smoke and mirrors. I'm telling you, Russ Wilson is dust. That guy is dust.
I agree. And if it's a negative game script, don't forget Samaje Piron's going to get some run in the passing game there too. And you're right about Mims. Like those points, that was busted coverage by Washington in the first half. I mean, that's just exactly what it was. So I really, really can't count on that. All right. Listen, the next game, we've been on the Chargers on this show for the last 2 weeks, but a lot of people have. And the question becomes, am I going to be on the Chargers again? Am I going to be on the Vikings? That is the game with the highest total. But before we get there, let's hear a word from our partners.
Well, you need the sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
We are back, and we're talking Chargers-Vikings. And listen, this is going to be the most popular game, and I think this game is interesting on a lot of levels because if you don't want to fade this game, well, if you want to fade this game, that, you know, good news, like you're from a game theory standpoint, you'll be in like relatively good shape. But there's so many pieces from both sides of the ball that I think you can invest in this game, but like kind of get different at the same time. So, James, I want to lead with that. I mean, obviously, Justin Herbert to Keenan Allen or Justin Herbert to Mike Williams, it all makes sense. Joshua Kelly is going to be tremendous value if Eckler is out, which is what it's trending to be. On the other side of the ball, Kirk Cousins to Jefferson. You could take a gamble on TJ Hawkinson, obviously, which isn't much of a gamble other than his price being a little bit higher than some of the tight ends you might want to play for. We have, and by the way, Hawkinson 6,500. We have Addison at 5,500. We have KJ Osborne, who's still getting plenty of looks at a flat 4K. I guess my first question for you is, are you interested in this game? Or are you interested in more of like fading this game because you think this is just going to be too popular for you?
There's three ways. There's three ways to play a game like this, and to me, only one of them is incorrect. You can just completely stack this game and go crazy with it. You can play some strategic pieces from it and avoid the rest of it, or you can completely fade it. Right? Those are the three options. And to me, completely fading a game that by far has the highest total is just rarely ever the answer. Right? There's a reason it has the highest total. Some pieces of this game are almost certainly going to go off. So to just close your eyes and hope that nobody from this game has a 30-plus point performance is, I think that's a fool's errand. So what I would tell you to do is, how can you get into this game? You can either go all in on it and just be super stacked up on it and just out leverage everybody that way. But really, to me, the more interesting play on these super chalky games is, how do I get into this game, get pieces of this game, knowing that it's going to be a shootout, that not only could my pieces go off, but if my pieces go off, they will directly negatively correlate to other people going off, right? If everybody wants to run a Herbert stack, maybe this is where I go play the Josh Kelly flop lag from last week, right? And that's what I like to do. I like to go into these games and get pieces that not only that I think are going to be in a good spot, but will also negatively correlate to the other chalky pieces in the game.
So let's say I was fixated on playing Joshua Kelly. I just really like the matchup relative to last week. Joshua Kelly much more likely to be running in between the tackles and maybe landing in the end zone in a 54-point total. If I'm fixated on playing the Joshua Kelly part, am I playing another piece on the Chargers side? Not a stack, but another piece on the Chargers side. And whether the answer is yes or no, what am I doing on the Minnesota side?
Yeah, so I would probably, you can, maybe you go run Kelly and Gerald Everett, right? Because I imagine those are going to be two of the lower-owned Charger pieces relative to the rest of them, right? Or maybe you take one of their punt wide receivers with Palmer or Johnston, right? But I would probably go with, one on that side. You can go with two, and then I would certainly correlate it with somebody from the Minnesota side, right? A 54-point total seems to indicate that both teams are going to be scoring and moving the ball. So to not have some action on both sides of that, I think is a little short-sighted. So I would have one or two Chargers, not even necessarily correlated, just correlated in the game, but not correlated to each other, and then run it back with a Viking or two.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think one of my favorite stacks is going to be probably on the Cousins side. The one thing I want to point about the Chargers side is that Brian Flores defensively, if you saw what he did against the Eagles, he kind of allowed the Eagles to do a lot underneath and not a lot down the field, which is part of the reason you saw A.J. Brown frustrated. Granted, Devontae Smith caught some long balls, but I think the Flores game plan, while he is aggressive, I do think he kind of leaves those safeties deep. And with that in mind, I'm not as interested in, I think Mike Williams is going to have a good game. He got 13 targets last week, but I also think Keenan Allen is going to be that underneath guy that keeps getting peppered and keeps kind of being left more open than some of the other receivers. So it makes me kind of steer towards the Kirk Cousins side. I think I like a Kirk Cousins double stack with Jefferson and either Addison and Osborne, and bring it back with really two Chargers. You could bring it back with one, but if you bring it back with Mike Williams or Keenan Allen and Joshua Kelly, listen, to me, DGen, all of those guys, that stack can succeed. That's like kind of a super stack there, but in this game, that's viable, right?
Yeah, and Keenan Allen's just a guy I got to eat crow on. I thought he was dust. I thought he was done, and he has really impressed me through these first 2 weeks. I was a big Mike Williams buyer. Not that he's been bad, but to me, Keenan Allen is still clearly the number one receiver there for the Chargers. So he's been very impressive. Honestly, at 7,600 in this game environment with the amount of targets he's going to get, he's probably almost cash viable. If I wouldn't tell you to spend that extra money to get up to Jefferson, I would probably say I would have Keenan Allen in my cash lineup.
Yeah, all right.
I think he'll get a dozen targets at least.
Yeah, fair enough. And speaking of a dozen targets, so I think Keenan Allen is very cash viable as well. So we've mentioned a couple already. There's another guy that's really cheap that I think is cash viable in this Texans-Jaguars game. Texans plus 8.5 at the Jaguars. It's a 44-point total. Listen, I think Nico Collins, we can have that conversation. He's obviously going to be the target guy, the primary guy for C.J. Stroud, who has been chucking it around the yard, which is pretty impressive if you think about it, because the offensive line has been so bad. I'm not super interested in this game. I think I'll have a couple of shares of Travis Etienne. I don't want to do the Trevor Lawrence stack thing. I don't know if it's Christian Kirk. I don't know if it's Calvin Ridley, if it's Evan Ingram, if it's Zay Jones. Etienne does intrigue me a little bit against this Texans front seven. On the other side, though, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. From a cash standpoint, do you like either of those two guys? And are you interested in this game at all from a tournament standpoint?
Stroud's one of those guys that I thought was horrific, and he kind of impressed me. They're actually moving the ball a little bit, and with as cheap as he is and his wide receiver options are, I can't believe I'm about to say this. I don't even mind a Stroud stack with an ETN run back, right? Which is so weird to say because, look, the Texans are going to probably be playing from behind in this game, which isn't the best script always for a rookie quarterback when the defense knows he's going to pass. But everybody knew he was going to pass the first 2 weeks, and he's still been able to throw the ball down the field and complete passes. And I think that Nico Collins and Tank Dell are like actual legitimate NFL wide receivers. And at those price tags, I think they're both very viable, and they seem to get like 90% of the targets just between those two guys. So I'm a little scared about playing a Houston guy in my cash lineup, but man, I love both those guys for GPPs.
Hey, that's an interesting stack because we have CJ Stroud at 5,300. You can stack him with Nico. So that's a $10,600 stack just right there. I mean, just to give you some perspective, that's almost as much as Justin Jefferson is like by himself. Exactly. So, but it allows you, a stack like that allows you to get Justin Jefferson in your lineup quite easy. And oh, by the way, CJ Stroud to Tank Dell, that's under 10,000. The total on that, I'm doing quick math. I think it's like almost exactly what Justin Jefferson is at 9,300.
It's a little cheaper, right? It'd be 8,900, and isn't he like 93 or something?
He's 93. Yeah. So, I mean, again, if you think, and I love the Etienne bring back because the theory is they're just moving the ball, they're running all over the Houston Texans, and the Texans are playing comeback ball in a negative game script and just having to pass to one of those two receivers. So that was not on my radar, James. I think it has to be at least a little bit because it's just so cheap and it allows you to pay for those high end receivers and still get shares of some of those big games. Etienne, is it a yes or no on Etienne?
Yes, I've been very impressed with how much he's been involved with their like he's getting a huge workload so far to start the season. I did not expect that. And at 6,900 in a favorable game script with a, 7.5 point line or 8.5 point line. I think you got to be pretty open to Etienne. Very open.
All right, yeah, I'm open to that as well. We got the next game is the Saints plus 1.5 at the Packers. It's a 42.5 point total, certainly a modest total. I don't think this is a game people are particularly interested in. However, it does look like Aaron Jones is going to be back. And Kendre Miller appears to be the guy in the Saints backfield with still no Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams injured over the next probably few weeks here. So is Kendre Miller on your radar? And if not, either way, is there any interest in this game with such a low total?
So for Kendre Miller, the answer is no. I don't know what to do with the Saints, and I do know Kendre Miller is electric, and I think he's going to be kind of like, Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, and people are going to be really impressed with how electric this rookie is. But I also just don't think they're going to run him out there and give him 15 or 20 touches in his first game. Yeah. But I will tell you, Packers at home with a guy who's been missing, who I think is a true wide receiver one. I'm just trying to convince myself. If I get word that Christian Watson's getting a full run on it, he will be in my lineups. I'm just a Christian Watson buyer this year, and I'm not going to let the first few weeks of him being banged up get me off of him at home whenever I think he could have like 12 target upside.
Yeah, and we're going to have to monitor practice really later today to see if he's in there because I think he practiced a little bit Wednesday. He sat out yesterday while Aaron Jones was running around. So let's monitor Christian Watson and Aaron Jones. I think what's interesting about Aaron Jones is that nobody's really going to want to play him coming off an injury, especially on this slate with such a low total here at 42.5. If he's a full go, any interest in playing Aaron Jones at likely very low ownership?
Yeah, I mean, the first week he was unbelievable, right? And in a script like this, I think, he makes a ton of sense, right? So, I just don't think A.J. Dillon's the dude. I think that Aaron Jones is definitively better than him. So if you think that, like, it's a 50-50 split between those two, I just don't think you understand that situation very well. Aaron Jones is pretty electric. I don't know that his salary off the top of my head, but if he's under 7,000, I'm probably in on big Aaron Jones.
Yeah, and let me take a quick look at the Aaron Jones pricing.
I would guess 6,800.
Did you say 6,800?
Yeah,
that's a good guess because he's 6,800.
I've been doing this for a while.
Very good, very impressive. Chris Olave, for whatever it's worth, 7K, but I'm not playing that. The Green Bay secondary is not really something you want to test. By the way, I like Green Bay to win that game outright. Just FYI there. I've already played the money line. I think they're 1.5 point favorites. A game I don't want to play in any regard whatsoever is the Patriots at the Jets, unless you want to trot out their defenses, which I think is totally fine. Is there anything, because we can just move on if the answer is no. Is there anything fantasy or I should say DFS viable here?
I wouldn't even be playing the defenses. So often people think that defenses you want to get, it's going to be a low-scoring game, give me the defense. But often defenses score the most when the games are more up-paced and there's more passing. That's more chances for sacks, interceptions, pick sixes. So even a defense in this game would have me very disinterested, as I think this will be a slow, sluggy game with very few plays, and a lot of those, a large percentage of them will be run plays, and defenses just don't score on running plays unless you get a random fumble.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I mean, I think the only argument would be how bad is Zach Wilson? And if they're down in this game, like how does this game turn out for the Patriots defense specifically? With that said, DJ, I'm with you. This is not one of the neither of these two defenses.
And I bet both their defenses are pricey too. And I'm not paying up for pricey defenses in a sloggy game.
Completely agree there. All right, coming up next, is Lamar Jackson a potential naked play this week? That sounded weird. Find out after a word from our partners.
Freddie! Surprise!
Dad!
What's going on with your son?
Wish I knew. Got a girlfriend I've never even heard of. When I told him I wanted to spend more time with him, he said no.
It's just not a good time.
Have you considered that he hates you?
Don't sit there! Those are Christian Lacroix pillows.
So we can't sit on the couch.
Not in jeans.
We are back. This is Fantasy Football Today, DFS. I'm with James at the Degenerate75. Make sure you give him a follow, not just on the X, still sounds weird, not just on Twitter, but also on his YouTube page. And James, your website, give us, is it dgen75.com?
That's it, dgen75.com, focused on DFS football, DFS golf, and just helping people get better at the process. Don't come over there looking for picks. I'm more about helping with the process and giving you the tools you need to make informed decisions and help you with your own process. So, most sites like mine are like, here's my core plays. We don't do any of that. So if that's what you're after, I'll just go ahead and save you some time. You won't like it.
Fair enough. All right. And don't forget, join his contest, which he's going to be tweeting out. I'm sure it'll be on his YouTube page as well. We've got the Colts +8 at the Ravens. Tough spot for the Colts. It's a 44-point total. So again, another modest total here. I think Lamar is interesting at 7,700. I mentioned before the break, playing him naked. I really don't want to, the Nelson Aguilar experience took off last week, so Zay Flowers, Aguilar, if Beckham's healthy, Mark Andrews, it's just a lot of mouths to feed here. So I don't know that I want to play him with anybody, but I do think Gus Edwards is interesting, not with Lamar, but I think he's interesting at 5,300 with Justice Hill likely sidelined this week. Of course, J.K. Dobbins is not going to be playing this year either. The problem here, and this goes for the Washington and the New England game, is we might have some weather concerns, a lot of rain, a lot of, quote, sloggy weather. Are you interested, James, in any of the pieces here? We have Zach Moss at 5,500 as well.
Yeah, so the thing with Lamar is I don't think you should ever play an NFL quarterback truly naked, which means with no other passing piece. Because even a guy like Lamar, who's one of the heaviest running quarterbacks in the NFL, they just don't run that heavy, right? If you think quarterbacks run heavy, go watch a college football game. Those guys can get there by themselves. NFL games, they're almost certainly going to drag one pass catcher along. And at least now it seems with Lamar, at least he has Zay Flowers, and of course he still has Mark Andrews really emerging as his top two mouths to feed. So I think running a little skinny stack with either one of those is viable. But to me, Gus Edwards, I think, is just a dude who's in a very safe spot. I mean, Ravens are really good. Ravens running backs are really good at running the ball, and they score a lot inside of the 5 because all the defenses are keying on Lamar Jackson on those zone reads or on those RPOs. So with that, I think Gus Edwards is probably over 50% to score a touchdown and likely to probably get in line of 15 touches. He gets a couple catches, he could be 20 points easy. So there's some ways to attack this game, but I would say Edwards would probably be the best one.
I really like Edwards' running style. He's very north-south. And if this becomes a game where they're just kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, just kind of beating the Colts into submission, they're doing it down the stretch with Gus Edwards, not Lamar Jackson running around in the fourth quarter protecting a double-digit lead. So I think Gus Edwards, he's not a sexy name too, because we don't think of him as a pass catcher to any degree, which, largely he's not. 5,300, it seems very appetizing. Any interest in Zach Moss coming off a full workload last week? He was 4,700 last week. He's 5,500 now. Again, we've got so many cheap running backs to consider. Would Moss make it, whether it be cash or maybe tournament viable?
I like Zach Moss, but I think the problem with Zach Moss is I just don't think this is going to be the best game environment for the Colts. I actually like him a lot more if Richardson plays, which I'm almost sure he's going to be out, and they're going with Gardner Minshew. And in that case, I think that kind of hurts Moss's value, right? Because that running threat that Richardson opens up helps Moss out. So Moss in a negative game script without Richardson, I think I would rather go to other quote-unquote chalky free space 5K running backs than Moss. Nothing wrong with Moss. I just think there's other guys that will probably be a little lower owned that I think offer higher upsides and safer floors than he does.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. And by the way, I only played, I kind of went with your strategy, James. We talked about this during the offseason series where we only have, I know in your case, you typically only have 2 stacks you play, 2 quarterbacks you play. And I usually have at least 3, but last week I only had 2. It was Jared Goff stacks, which this show is very familiar with. They did a lot of Jared Goff stacks as well, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Josh Reynolds, which worked out to some degree. Amon-Ra missed some parts of the game, so that didn't really help. But my other quarterback that I played was Anthony Richardson. And can I tell you how much my account, and I had a lot of lineups with Richardson, how much my account jumped after basically the first quarter of play, which I understand is very early, but Richardson was on track to score. I mean, I'm speculating, like account for like 5 touchdowns at least, the way that game was going. And I was winning like all of my, I had Josh Reynolds in the Richardson lineups too. So, and he had just caught a touchdown pass. That's the unfortunate side of DFS sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, he was on pace to break the slate. He already had 50 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, which are gold because they get you the full 6 points as opposed to just those 4-point passing touchdowns. I mean, I think if he plays the full game, at worst, he scores 30 to 35 points. That was the kind of game he was on pace for, which would have absolutely broke the slate, and he was at low ownership. So kudos to you, and then a reminder that even when you're smart and you make good plays, sometimes you still don't get there. Because I went with Geno stacks. I was on the other side of that game, and Geno did great. I think he was the 2nd or 3rd highest scoring quarterback on the slate, but DK Metcalf gets banged up in the first quarter, and then it's just never the same the rest of the game, and almost all my Geno lineups had Metcalf. So even when you do good and you think it through and you have a great process, sometimes you can still get unlucky.
Which is why James always says, focus on the process, not the outcome. Because if your process is right, you're going to be in the mix more often than not. And that's really what you want to be focused on. It was very discouraging to have the Anthony Richardson thing happen. But at the same time, I knew my process was right. My stacks were good. My plays were good. It just didn't end up working out for me. We got the Bills -6.5 at the Commanders. I'm not really interested in this one. It's a 43.5 point total. This is another one of those games where we might have some weather concerns, maybe a wet field, maybe some downpours. It might be calm. Who knows? But Brian Robinson at 5,800, I don't think I'm going to invest there, even though Eric Bieniemy has really kind of made him a focal point of the offense. Jahan Dotson in a potential negative game script at 4,900. I don't think I'm going there either. And I'm not really interested in the Josh Allen side. Are you interested in any correlations, any stacks, any players in this game?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the Bills, you always want to consider the Bills, but, they don't exactly have a huge total in this game. And furthermore, I am a little concerned about the weather, them being on the road. I see them just maybe grinding out this game. If I were going to get any part of this game, I might just go with the Bills running back. James Cook is good. I wish they would stop pulling him every time he gets inside the 10 and he can never get a rushing touchdown. If he ever gets one, it's going to have to be a 25-yarder. And then the Commanders, I think they're a lot like the Broncos. I think they're smoke and mirrors. Like last week, I know they had the big total and all that, but I just don't think they're good. I'm not going to overreact to one good week. So by and large, the Bills are too expensive, and I think that the Commanders are fake. There you go.
Yeah, that's fair enough. One thing to point out, I think Dawson Knox missed practice yesterday. So if you're looking for a punt tight end, if the weather's good, maybe Dalton Kincaid gets his chance here, but that's probably not something I'm resorting to. I just kind of wanted to point that out. All right, we've got 3 4:00 games. I'm a fan of playing this afternoon slate. So some of these guys I mentioned might be kind of more afternoon only guys as opposed to main slate guys. But we got the Panthers +6 at the Seahawks. It's a 42.5 point total. Panthers rolling out. Well, it's not going to be Bryce Young. It's going to be Andy Dalton, which I got to be honest with you, might be better for the Panthers, at least right here, right now. Ken Walker's interesting to me at 6,200. Adam Thielen seems to be the receiver of choice at 3,900. At least it was for Bryce Young. We'll see about Andy Dalton. JSN at 4,300. I'm not really interested in anything here other than maybe Kenneth Walker. Anything you like here?
But it's just a gross game. I don't like the total. I don't like these teams. The Seahawks offense, I think people are going to be buying high off of last week as they seem to really show a pulse. But once again, they were playing at the Lions Stadium, which that place is just magical when it comes to fantasy scoring. So I'm not going to overreact to that this week. The thing with Walker is at 6,200, he's not very efficient. If he doesn't fall into the box last week twice, he does nothing. I mean, wildly inefficient, 2 yards a carry inefficient. So yeah. I'm not convinced that they're going to just run the ball that easily. And if I remember correctly, the Panthers do have a sneaky good run defense. So
they do.
That's not something that I'm wanting to target Walker in there. I mean, other than the fact that he's most likely to be in a good game script at home, but I think a lot of people are going to take that bait, and I think I can get it elsewhere.
Yeah, I think for me, maybe I'm playing Walker in the afternoon slate because while he is inefficient, there are those times where he busts a 60-yard run, and obviously that's potentially slate breaking for you. But I agree, and you're right. The Carolina front seven is actually pretty good. It's the back end that's been the problem. J.C. Horn's still injured for Carolina, so if you're going to expose them, it's probably going to be on the back end. But this total, like nothing really screams to me like I want to play this game. But again, in the afternoon slate, maybe I have some sort of skinny stack with Walker and maybe Adam Thielen on the other side. Maybe even Jackson Smith and Jigba and Thielen on the other side, or you take a chance with maybe a Jonathan Mingo, something like that. Next game, this one's really interesting to me. I don't think I'm going to main slate play it, but afternoon slate, I think I might play Justin Fields. Maybe naked, by the way. I know that's not something you like to do, but I might correlate him with like Travis Kelce. Like literally that's what I do in that game. I have Justin Fields and I correlate him with Travis Kelce, and then I move on to one of the other two afternoon games. But let's just kind of referring to the main slate here. Any interest in a Mahomes stack or Mahomes in general or the Justin Fields side?
No, I just never run Mahomes stacks on main slates because he's so darn hard. You got to double stack him. A quarterback like him as a quarterback, you have to double stack because at that price tag, he's going to have to carry 2 pass catchers across the finish line with him. And, okay, we always know to play him with Kelce. Okay, got it. Who else? Right? Like, I don't want to rotate his roulette of wide receivers for the second spot. So I'm never a big Mahomes guy. But I think Justin Fields is a guy that, like, he could push the pace of this game. He has not had a breakout game this year, but we have seen it before. He clearly can do it. And he's a guy that you only need to run a skinny stack with, right? DJ Moore is due to have a breakout, right? He could get just one bomb to one pass catcher. They keep the pace of this game up. You know the Chiefs are going to score the ball on the Bears. You can run it back with Kelce. You can run it back with Pacheco. I don't know if I would want to run it back with any of that roulette of wide receivers. I think this, like, especially if my early slate doesn't go well on Sunday, I will be switching to some stacks in this game just to get weird to maybe play catch up.
Right. You're talking late swap on the main slate, right?
Exactly.
Love that. Love that. And everybody that's listening, you should know some of the late swap strategies. But again, what James is saying, for those of you that are kind of new to late swap, you shouldn't be. But if things aren't going well on the main slate and you have something chalky in the afternoon slate from a stack standpoint, well, maybe you get off that chalk. And there's not a lot of chalk in the afternoon slate, especially from the quarterback position. But just from a theoretical standpoint, get off the chalk, try to make up some ground in the afternoon by going to some players, particularly some high-end players that at least have, while it's a low floor, a high ceiling, and maybe you can play catch up and end up finishing in the cash in your tournaments. Keep an eye on Kadarius Toney's practice reports if you want to get involved in Mahomes stacks. Isaiah Pacheco at 5,400. I don't like the Kansas City backfield, obviously, but again, particularly in the afternoon slate, he's at least interesting because, again, if they're protecting a huge lead, we know it's not Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's probably not Jerick McKinnon protecting that lead, because that's not when they use Jerick McKinnon. It's usually Isaiah Pacheco. So I'm probably not playing Pacheco on the main slate, but in the afternoon slate, somebody I'm very interested in. This last game in the 4 o'clock slate is not super interesting beyond Tony Pollard. It's the Cowboys minus 12.5 at the Cardinals, 43-point total. Pollard is 8,000. I don't think I'm getting to him on the main slate, but I understand why people are. He's going to be pretty popular. Jake Ferguson, Marquise Brown, Zach Ertz, these are all guys that might be interesting in this game. I'm off this game completely. What are you thinking here?
I think Tony Pollard's going to have like 23 points at halftime, and then he's going to finish the game with like 24 points, right? Like, I think the Cowboys are going to go out there and boat race the Cardinals because I think the Cowboys are good, and I think the Cardinals are bad. And that combination is, I think you can see Tony Pollard basically already out of this game after like the first drive of the third quarter. And so because of that, it really kills his upside on what he can do and to pay off that 8K tag, because you want him to have 35, 40-point upside, which sounds ridiculous, but Tony Pollard can have that if he gets 20 touches. And I just don't know that he's going to get all his full allotment of touches if the Cowboys are playing from very far ahead, which the line would seem to indicate they will be.
Yeah, and I'll point out that with the Diggs injury yesterday tearing his ACL, it does make me think, well, maybe Marquise Brown at 4,900 is at least interesting in a negative game script. Now, again, that might be something I do on the afternoon slate only as opposed to the main slate, but keep that in mind. Like, obviously, we're looking at a negative game script with Dobbs, who's shown that he can chuck the ball around a little bit here and there. And I think Marquise Brown likely to be his primary wide receiver there. All right, James, I think we covered the entire main slate. So what we do now, and you might not be familiar with it, we go over Mike McClure's cheat sheet, which he was kind enough to send to us. We go over my cheat sheet, and we're going to do that real quick, and then we're going to do Mike's top 3 at each position. So I'm going to roll through the cheat sheets, James, and you tell me if there's anything from Mike's or mine that you're like, I'm playing that. I like that guy, or I'm off that. Any reaction whatsoever. I'm going to go ahead and read off Mike's cheat sheet first. And he has what Oh, this is nice. If you're watching us on YouTube, these are really cool graphics. We're gonna have to post this on the X, on the Twitter, because this is new. Good job, Nada, who's doing all the hard work behind the scenes here. He's got Justin Herbert at 7,500 and Mike Williams at 6,000. It sounds to me, James, like you like Mike Williams, right?
Yeah, so like I just looking at his sheet here, the answer is I like them all. The only one I would have any reservations about is this Herbert to Williams, simply just because of the ownership that it's going to be there. But from just making sense, I love it. I'm a Mike Williams kind of guy, and obviously, if I love Mike Williams, there's a very good chance that Justin Herbert's also getting there if Mike Williams is having a big game.
Yeah, and keep this in mind from a cash game standpoint too. Herbert to Mike Williams might be just like a great stack for you to have in your cash games. And just reading the rest of it, he's got his chalk plays Jerome Ford, another cash game viable guy. His value play, KJ Osborne, probably not cash, probably more of a tournament play. His fade is Zach Ertz because he's projecting high ownership for Zach Ertz coming off last week. But Ertz would be a cash game viable play. So again, this is what we're looking at. We're trying to throw in some cash game guys too. And Jahan Dotson's his contrarian play in what's likely a negative game script. McLaurin's still kind of working off the turf toe to some degree. So, I mean, I guess Dotson makes sense as a contrarian play, but again, you got to monitor the weather there because this might be kind of a slog fest. So that's Mike's cheat sheet. We'll go to mine real quick. I've got the other side of the Justin Herbert stack. It's a little cheaper on the quarterback end, but it's certainly not cheaper on the receiver end. I think Cousins is going to throw for more than 300 yards. I think Justin Jefferson is going to be the primary beneficiary of that. I do think Addison, Osborne, Hawkinson are all in play there, which is why I'm likely double stacking Cousins and bringing it back with two guys. One of those two guys is going to be Joshua Kelly. He's my value at 5,400. So my stack, Cousins to Jefferson, my value, Joshua Kelly. My chalk is Tank Dell at 3,600. I think he's going to end up being chalk. We'll see about that. In fact, you know what? That's reversed. Tank Dell is my value. Excuse me. He's at 3,600. The chalk play is Joshua Kelly. So stack Cousins to Jefferson. Chalk play is Joshua Kelly. Value at 3,600 is Tank Dell. And this is wrong too. Okay, so the fade is not Jordan Addison. That's actually my contrarian play. And then Raheem Mostert is going to be my fade. And that's just because Mostert might have a good game. But the reality is I can't fit him in. I'm going to play a lot of different running backs that are cheaper than Raheem Mostert. So he's just my fade because I know I'm not getting there. So just to recap, Cousins to Jefferson, Joshua Kelly's my chalk. My value is Tank Dell, fade Raheem Mostert, and my contrarian is Jordan Addison. Any comments there, James?
First of all, yeah, Mike has much better handwriting than you in the graphics. That would be my first big takeaway. The second big takeaway is I just want to point out how brave you are for going with a Cousins to Jefferson stack. Just really putting yourself out there. That's what I love about Sia. Just, not just afraid to really put himself out there and go super contrarian with his stack. Respect.
Yes, and keep that in mind when you're doing your cash games, because I do think Cousins to Jefferson is obviously viable in cash. Joshua Kelly, obviously a cash game play. I think Tank Dell is a cash game play too. I think Nico Collins is in that conversation as well. So again, these are some cash game plays that we're putting out there. And for the record, just talking about other stacks, I think I think there's a few stacks I like. I'll narrow it down to 2 or 3, but I do think that golf stack is viable, especially if Mon-Fri is healthy, and bringing it back with Bijan in tournaments, I think is a really good way to stack that game. All right, let's do Mike's top 3 at each position, and then we're going to get out of here. Let's start at the quarterback position. His top 3 are Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, interesting, and Kirk Cousins. All right, so he's all in on that 54-point total, which makes sense. His running backs, Jerome Ford, value, Joshua Kelly, value. Oh, and then interesting, Miles Sanders over in Seattle as his 3rd favorite running back. All right, that's a little different, James. Any thoughts there?
It's bold. I just Miles Sanders is a guy that I already don't trust. Then I don't trust Carolina's offense, and I don't trust that game script. That's like the holy trinity of reasons I would not be playing Miles Sanders.
Well, the good news there is that while he has 2 chalky guys at the front end of that running back list, he certainly has a contrarian guy on the back end if you want to participate there. His wide receivers, no surprise here, Mike Williams, Justin Jefferson, and he's going to play Tyreek Hill. If you get Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill in your lineup, it's very expensive. It's possible if you find value in those Tank Dells, in those 5K and 4K running backs. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people, James, are going to play Tyreek Hill because they want so much investment in some of those other games that they're just not going to get there. Are you pro, or I shouldn't say pro, is Hill going to make it into your lineups this week is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so Tambo actually said this on the show Tuesday, and this is just part of the reason that I love like talking roster construction with him, because he said what people could do that no one's going to think of is you go play that Chargers-Vikings game, right? You get a whole bunch of it, but you just go take Jefferson out and you just go put Tyreek Hill in, right? So you still have that game, and you just take out that one piece, and now you're getting Tyreek Hill, who I think we all agree is has just as much upside as Justin Jefferson. And if Hill goes off and the other game goes off, well, you're still going to be fine because you have so many pieces of that Vikings-Charger game, but maybe that was the key play, was just to get those 5 or 10 extra points that maybe Tyreek Hill got over Justin Jefferson, and that will let you build your rosters way different than everybody else is. And that really stuck with me when he said that.
I love that, especially when you consider the concentrated target share that we have in Miami, and we don't necessarily have that in Minnesota. As good as Justin Jefferson is, a lot of those targets could very well go to Addison, Osborne, TJ Hawkinson, among others. So that seems like a really good move when you know you're pivoting to a guy that's going to get a ton of targets, because Tua just doesn't pass to other guys for the most part. So absolutely love that from Tambo. Tight end, Travis Kelce. Interesting. So he's going to be playing some Mahomes Kelce stacks. Durham Smythe. Oh, there you go, James. 2,900 Durham Smythe. Love that. And then he's got Chigakonkwo of the tight end for the Tennessee Titans as his third favorite tight end. Very interesting. Well, James, first of all, I don't think you need to comment there. You're not playing Kelce. It sounds like you do like Durham Smythe. Any other tight ends that come to mind when you're,
I'm just a big fan of my tight end usually being correlated to my quarterback stacks, right? So like I like whenever I'm picking my quarterback stacks, I like to factor in their tight end. So that's usually where I get in there, because that's a great way to let your stacks save some money and allow you to spend up at other places. So your stack isn't always 3 super expensive guys. I can go, whatever. Let's say that I go Josh Allen and Diggs. Well, that's a lot of money. Now I could go punt with a Knox or a Kincaid or something like that to save me some money on that stack.
Absolutely love it. All right, everybody, thank you for being in the chat. Thanks for hitting the like button. Thanks for doing all these things. Hopefully you're subscribed to this show on Apple or Spotify. Hopefully you're subscribed to everything that James does. Maybe you've already visited his website, dgen75.com, but you can definitely check him out for free on YouTube. He has a ton of content up there. James, anything else going on in the universe of the Degenerate 75?
Nope, just I'm doing PGA, college football, and NFL right now, which probably wasn't the best decision when it came to having a life, but we're doing them all the time. I'm live 6 days a week now, so just come check out the Degenerate 75 on YouTube. It's free, and you never know. You might just like the cut of my jib.
You might just like the cut of his jib. All right, for James at the Degenerate 75, my name is Nejad. Don't forget to register for James's contest, which, what is it, $5, James?
Yep, three max, $5. Yep.
That's what ours is. It's a $5 contest. So make sure you register for both of those this week. And we're going to see you on Tuesday for a recap. We're going to have a special guest on Tuesday as well when we do our early look at pricing. That show is at 10:30. It's a very quick hitter, 30-minute show, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. Until then, this is Fantasy Football